Hello, everyone. Let's discuss this question from October-November 2024, variant 1-1. This is a 5-mark question. This happens to be question number 4. This question is on the infamous study that was conducted by Stanley Milgram in the year 1963. Now, if you talk about this particular study, if you let me help you recall, Milgram wanted to see whether ordinary people would obey an authority figure's instructions to administer what they believed were real electric shocks to another person. This study involved 40 participants. These participants were told that they were participating in a study on learning and memory. This was an example of deception. This is an example of deception. This study was conducted at the prestigious Yale University, and we cannot ignore the fact that the institution or the place where this research was conducted might have had an impact on the results or the findings of the research. Each participant in this study was assigned the role of a teacher, whereas the role of a learner was played by a confederate. The teacher had to test the learner on a word pair memory task and administer an electric shock for every incorrect answer, increasing the voltage of the shock every time. So every time the learner made a mistake, which of course, because the learner was a confederate, he kept on doing that intentionally, purposefully, with a purpose. So the teacher had to test the learner on a word pair memory task. Keep this in mind. The shocks that were given to the learner, the fake shocks, the pseudo shocks that were given to the learner, they range from 15 volts to a deadly 450 volts. Whereas in reality, we need to remember that there was no shock given because it was a fake shock generator. Despite of hearing the learners' protests and eventually silence, the results or the findings of this research showed that 65% of the participants continued to the maximum of 450 volts, which of course showed a very high level of obedience towards an authority figure. Do you know what? Most of these participants, they displayed signs of stress, but they still continued to obey the experimenter's command. Now, having a look at the question again, in this study by Milgram, there was a learning task. Milgram called this a paired associate learning task. Milgram called this a paired associate learning task. Describe this learning task as used in the study. Now you're expected to describe this learning task, and this question is of 5 marks. And because this question is of 5 marks, you're expected to give at least 5 correct points to this, and you would get 1 mark per correct point. Now, if we talk about this particular learning task, which Milgram referred to as the paired associate learning task, this was to give participants who was playing the role of who was actually the participant was actually the teacher. The teacher in the experiment was actually the participant, in which the participants, the researcher, that is Milgram, he wanted to test if participants would administer electric shock to the learner if they were given commands in a structured manner. So if we have a look at this, number one, the participants read out a series of words to the learner. Number two, the participants then read out one word along with 4 terms. The learner then had to indicate which word had been originally paired or responded with the corresponding word. This was done by him pressing one of the 4 switches. This lit up one of 4 quadrants in the answer box. Now have a look at this real quick. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So you have 6 points that the examiner has provided you, and you're expected to write any 5 of them correctly to be able to score a 5 on 5. Now, having a quick look at the guidance here, this list is definitive. Of course, you cannot add up anything on your own. The answer has to be about the learner and not the teacher. The learner, uh, yeah, the learning task is different to the shock instruction, so ignore reference to the latter. That is, you would not get any marks if you end up writing down anything about the instructions for the shock. Award 1 mark max for each incorrect answer received. A shock or correct answer, move to the next word. So taking this ahead, we were talking about how this particular paid associate learning task worked. Initially, like I said, there was word pairs association with the teacher who was a real participant who read a list of words to the learner who was a confederate. Then came the testing or the recall part where the teacher then read out one word from a pair followed by 4 possible answers. The learner's response, the learner had to choose the correct paired word by pressing a button there. Now, I hope this was helpful. What has to be kept in mind over here is, remember, for questions like these, there are 5 mark questions. Where you've been asked anything related to the procedure, you should keep the number, the marks, the total marks that the question has been allocated to in mind. Like this says, you get 1 mark per correct answer. So I hope this has been helpful. Thank you.